This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Good afternoon. I'm Victor Jack, energy reporter at Politico Europe. I'm coming to you from ACE Events in Brussels, and welcome to our live event, Meeting Europe's Renewable Energy Challenge. Renewables have emerged as the big winners of the EU's green transition, with tumbling production prices, shifting industrial policy priorities, and the worst energy crisis in a generation turbocharging interest in renewables. Today, green energy enjoys unprecedented recognition among industry, policymakers, and investors, with growth in renewables outstripping expectations so much that the International Energy Agency continually has to revise its growth forecasts. But paradoxically, Europe's solar and wind industry is also facing a serious crisis, with high inflation putting pressure on long-term contracts, supply chain bottlenecks and permitting issues holding up projects, and fierce competition with China threatening a wave of bankruptcies. So today's discussion comes at a perfect time, as EU countries this morning finally approved the Renewable Energy Directive. Now, the next challenge for Brussels will be implementation and keeping Europe's green industry alive. We will be discussing all this and more with our panelists, but first things first, we have some housekeeping remarks. I would like to thank our partner EDP for making this event possible, and thank our fantastic Politico Live team who have made it all come together. We would like to make this event as interactive as possible. You can participate by tweeting about it at @LivePolitico and ask questions through the Slido app using #EnergyChallengeEU. I'd only ask you that if you do so, you give your name and organization so it's fully transparent for our viewers and for our panelists. You can already share your thoughts and answer the following poll presented by our partner, EDP, with the question, which are the main challenges for an accelerated deployment of renewables in Europe? We will look at the results at the end of our panel. Before we will hear some opening remarks from our partner, Miguel Stilwell de Andrade, the CEO of EDP. But just before we give the floor to him, we're just going to have a quick video from EDP. Thanks.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by.
I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I see skies of blue and clouds of white.
The energy transition is one of the greatest challenges of all time. United, we can keep this a wonderful world. We are committed. Are you?
What a wonderful world.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, Commissioner Simpson, Mr. Casares, and Wahlberger and Giles. Thank you very much. And I mean, we brought the video not for anything, but just because we think sometimes it's good to have a little bit of perspective on what I think we're all working on. We get a lot of times caught up in the day-to-day and in the arguments, and so much going on in the world. But at the end of the day, certainly we are totally committed to really what is probably one of the most pressing problems that we have as a civilization, which is the transition to the net zero economy. And it's a real challenge, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's a special day because I think everyone here on this panel today does have that as a mission, different views, different opinions, but we are all working towards the same thing. And so I'm certainly looking forward to today's discussion. EDP is a global energy company. I'm proud to say it's one of the largest producers of clean renewable energy in the world. We've been prioritizing investments in the renewable generation for over 20 years. And we have operations in more than 20 countries producing either wind or solar with batteries and many other sources of renewable energy, including also hydro. This year, more than 80% of the energy produced by EDP came from renewable sources. Yet 20 years ago, almost 80% of the energy produced by EDP was from thermal sources. So this is really, when we talk about the energy transition, I think we have a good case study. I mean, we have a good story, I think, to tell. It is possible to do it. We are doing it. And as you saw in the video, we expect to be 100% green by 2030, if not before. In Europe, we're present in 12 markets, which together represent 90% of the expected solar capacity additions in Europe until 2030, and 80% of the wind capacity. So I think we have a pretty good sense for what's going on in the European market on the renewable side. And we really do want to be a part of the solution. That's something we see that not as a threat to us, but as an opportunity, and an opportunity where you can combine having an impact and a purpose with something that hopefully also makes business sense, which is also the purpose of companies. It's clear that we need to accelerate the effort towards the net zero target, and the energy sector is key in that transformation. It's not easy, and we face the typical trilemma that typically everyone talks about. I mean, we need to have energy security, environmental sustainability, we need to have affordability, and balancing these three issues is obviously key. So first, energy security. We know that this is absolutely critical and vital for our modern world. It fuels industries, powers homes, it drives technological advancements. And we've all seen in a very close and personal way, I think, certainly with the Ukraine war, how dependent on fossil fuels we had become, and how this also poses a risk at a geopolitical level. So these tensions, price volatility, the threat of supply disruptions, they all highlight the importance of diversifying energy sources and investing in infrastructure of renewable generation and power grids, both in new assets and also using existing assets more efficiently. I mean, we've talked a lot about using hybrid projects, putting wind and solar together, using the same interconnection points. I mean, all of this allows us to scale up faster than simply trying to do everything on an isolated way. So having all these multiple technologies working in tandem, I think is something really we should all be very focused on. It's still not possible to do in some countries. In others, it is possible to do, and it's a major source of scaling up renewables. Some question the intermittency of renewables. I know there are a lot of skeptics out there. But quite frankly, there are many examples of countries with penetration of renewables, 60, 70% or more, perfectly functioning electricity systems with storage, some backup power, good interconnection. If we have a united Europe, a more interconnected energy Europe, we will certainly have a more resilient power sector. And so I really don't think that that should be the bottleneck. And it's certainly not something that should be holding us back now. We're still so far away from the targets that to worry about the intermittency, I think, is really a non-issue. However, in the development of clean energy projects in Europe, we do still face bottlenecks. I will talk that they have improved, but typically the permitting, I was looking at that survey that was up on the board just a little while ago. Permitting continues to be sometimes an issue in some countries at least. Supply chain restrictions, NIMBY mindset. We need to work with the local communities. Companies need to do that. I think we absolutely appreciate that we need to be good citizens. I think it is extremely important, the step that Europe has taken to also introduce the concept of public overriding interest. And so we need to find that balance between working with the local communities, but also not forgetting the national interest. And with that, hopefully being able to reduce the time it takes to develop projects down to the 2-year period that the European Union has recommended. Many projects, unfortunately, still taking 5, 6, 7 years or more. So things have improved in some countries, but many member states still need to dedicate more resources and eliminate bureaucracy to accelerate the rollout of renewables. The key words should be simplification, standardization, digitalization. We need to do this in all of the different member states if we want to really accelerate this. So we need to have that strong political and regulatory support to address these issues and enable this energy security in Europe. Secondly, just a note on environmental sustainability. I think it's clear our planet is facing environmental challenges driven by energy consumption patterns. I'm certainly a believer. I think climate change, air pollution, we look at hottest year in ever, September, breaking all records. Honestly, I think it's difficult to ignore that anymore. I don't think really that's up for debate, at least as far as I'm concerned. But so transitioning away from fossil fuels and embracing renewable energies is essential to create a healthier environment for future generations. And we need to continue to develop innovative solutions to do that and to harmonize that renewables development with nature protection. There are many solutions. I think innovation, one of the interesting things about the International Energy Agency roadmap when they came out was that they said there were a lot of solutions that perhaps are not even mature yet or not yet developed, but that will need to be developed over the coming decades to achieve the 2050 target. So, certainly things like floating solar PV on water reservoirs or, and actually has benefit effects both for the reservoir and for the solar PV. Just to name a few examples. So clearly, I think this issue around environmental sustainability is a key concern for many of us. Third, and very importantly, particularly in Europe, I think over the last 12, 18 months is energy affordability. I think it's very clear that energy costs strain household budgets. They hinder industrial competitiveness. They create more social inequalities. But renewables are the cheapest source of electricity worldwide. I think, again, we've seen how fast and how far the costs for wind and solar have come down. I've been in the sector for more than 20 years, and I remember not that long ago, but just 10 years ago, it was cheaper to build a new power plant run on fossil fuels than to build a new solar or wind farm. Wind was 22% and solar more than 200% more expensive than coal. Within just 1 decade, the price of electricity from utility scale solar has declined by almost 90% and wind onshore by 70%. It is extremely competitive source of energy. So shifting to electrification and investing in renewable technologies, fostering innovation, I think this will pave the way for a much more affordable and sustainable energy future for all. But I also wanted to just touch on some of the headwinds, which I think are more and more apparent, unfortunately. The energy transition requires hundreds of billions of euros of capital to be invested every year at a global level over the next few decades in long-term projects with an expected useful life of more than 30 years. When we invest in a project, we are expecting that it will be working for the next 30 years or more. That requires investors to be committed and to have an expectation that they will get a reasonable return on their investment. Unfortunately, the renewable energy sector at the moment is struggling with the effects of the macroeconomic crisis, marked by higher for longer inflation and interest rates, which have had a dramatic and rapid increase. And this is undermining investors' confidence in the sector's growth value proposition. I think this is something we need to call attention to. This has been compounded over the last 2 years by a combination of regulatory price caps, extraordinary taxes, clawbacks, and other extraordinary mechanisms that have reduced the ability of companies to continue to invest in the energy transition. Clear example, the Clean Energy Index, representing many of the renewable energy players along the value chain, is down more than 30% this year and 45% over the last 3 years. So in a time when we should be accelerating the energy transition, when companies should be growing, and they are all now worth 45% less, almost half of what they were worth 3 years ago. So I think that should raise just a question mark in terms of what's going on. So one of the key themes, unfortunately, that's emerging among investors is that we should slow down investments in renewables because they don't trust the returns that will be there. That would be a real setback for the future that we're trying to build. That's not our plan, but I have to be, and I think the numbers are there, so I'm not saying anything. I think if the value of the sector as a whole is down almost 50% over 3 years, I think there's a real question mark about really what is going on in the renewable sector. Unfortunately, not all sectors, fossil fuels, I think, is up over this period. So we should be accelerating deployment of renewables at 3 or 4 times the speed of what historically has happened. We need to be accelerating. And instead of that, the discussion, unfortunately, is currently to step back. So if you read a lot of the researches of companies in the sector at the moment, it's maybe you guys should calibrate a little bit. Maybe don't build so fast because actually, we don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. So I honestly believe that's not ideal. That's not what we want collectively. It's certainly not what we want as a company. Now, on a positive note, I have to recognize the European Union has been making tremendous efforts. The Commission, the Parliament, and most member states are pushing for a clean energy system based on renewables. I mean, the 2030 binding target of 42.5% renewables representation in the final energy consumption and the additional 600 gigawatts capacity of renewables by that date, by the 2030 date, are bold commitments. But it is essential to recognize that enacting legislation is only the first step. The success of its effective implementation relies on action and commitment at the member state level. It needs to be fast and straightforward, with no fragmentation, with no patchwork of measures and half measures implemented discretionarily by each member state. In my opinion, that will be key in the next couple of years to successfully deliver on Europe's ambition. I think it's also crucial to ensure that the reform of the EU's electricity market is adapted to benefit investors and consumers, including households and industries. And I congratulate everyone who's worked on that, because I think, honestly, it's a fantastic job that's been done. Many people criticize the European Union, but quite honestly, I think the leadership it's shown over this period at various different levels is very impressive. So long-term contracting, long-term price signals, they are key to de-risk renewable investments and give visibility to developers and off-takers on revenues and electricity prices. And at the same time, I think that the phase-out of emergency measures that have been taken in a relatively uncoordinated manner by many member states will also be key. I think there'll be a great opportunity now with the wind power package later in October to correct or to present a more positive tone, hopefully for investors over this period. At EDP, we will continue to play our part. We are totally committed to investing in the development of renewable projects, whether it's wind or solar, whether it's emerging technologies like batteries and electrolyzers for hydrogen. We will continue to invest in the modernization and the digitalization of our power grids. It's a fundamental enabler of the energy transition. And I'm sure I could say a lot more on all of these topics, but I certainly don't want to take any more space from the panel. And I'm sure you will all talk on many of these topics. I really would like to thank you all for being here. And also thanking Politico for making this conference possible. And I would just appeal that we would take this opportunity to really work collectively to make this happen, to make this energy transition happen at the European level and at the global level. And I think this is a major challenge that we have, and we really need to work together to make it happen at the various different levels. And so you can certainly count on us to help be a part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for those remarks. I'm sure we'll be touching on lots of those points throughout the discussion. So now I'd like to welcome our guests to the stage. A warm welcome, please, for Kadri Simpson, EU Commissioner for Energy. Next, we have Giles Dixon, CEO of Wind Europe. Nicolas González-Cesares, who is an MEP, S&D from Spain, who is also the rapporteur for the electricity market design proposal, and Walburga Hemmetsberger, the CEO of Solar Power Europe. Thank you very much for joining us. So, we've got a lively discussion ahead of us, a lot of ground to cover. I want to start with something I think that Miguel touched on, which is that the solar industry at the moment is asking the EU for an emergency €100 million bailout or risks facing a wave of bankruptcies in the sectors. Valburga, I want to start with you and ask you, I mean, why is this happening now and how urgently do you need this cash?
So first of all, let me maybe start to put it against the background of how we're doing more generally in the solar sector. So we've been growing 40 gigawatt last year, and this year we're looking into further stellar growth, installing in between 50 and 60 gigawatt. And this is exactly what we need, very fast rollout of solar in Europe. But what we need as well is not to be completely dependent from a single source when sourcing solar panels in order to build our future. But we need to have a diverse supply chain. We need to source from around the globe, and we need to also build up our own industry. Now, we have industry still in Europe. We have polysilicon production, a major polysilicon production. We still have inverters, 35,000 jobs in Europe. But there's a big gap in the supply chain in between. There's some projects who are ready to scale up. But at the moment, what we see in the market is some kind of a perfect storm of very low prices, which is good news for deploying more solar, but which is making it more difficult to get to the 30 gigawatts that the European Commission also has set as a goal by 2030 with the players that we have today, just because it's making it more difficult. And this is why we call for urgent action to make sure that those players who are ready to scale up can scale up quickly and not going bankrupt in the meanwhile.
No, thanks for that. And Commissioner, I want to come to you. As Valburga said, I mean, your aim is for the EU to be able to produce 30 gigawatts of solar by 2030, which obviously can't happen if half the companies go bankrupt. Are you open to an emergency bailout?
Well, I think that there have been several very promising developments already using innovation fund financing. So we see across Europe that gigafactories are opening the production lines here in Europe, and this is due to the support that EU can provide. But this is also clear that we do have limited public resources, and majority of the investment that we need for our green transition has to come from private sector. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a very good meeting with stakeholders. It was organized by International Energy Agency together with ECB and European Investment Bank. And what we heard there was that money is available if there are good projects in pipeline. So we, as European Commission and governments, we have to send a clear signal that there is investment case. Miguel was mentioning that everybody expects that before investment decision is made, you will be secured with reasonable revenues. And this was one of the main principles of our electricity market design too, that we will give investment certainty. And I do believe that one day when we conclude these negotiations with the help of member states and especially European Parliament, that sends a very good signal, and we will have many private investors eager to finance facilities here in Europe. And on top of that, of course, us as Commission, we have to take care of the supply of materials that this industry will need, and this is the reason why we are setting up a international club with trusted partners to secure that our industry will have also access to these materials.
And you appear skeptical then on the actual prospect of an emergency bailout.
Well, over the past few years, starting with COVID and then with energy crisis, there have been dozens, if not hundreds, of state aid decisions made by Commission. So if this is justified, if there is a clear case that justifies this decision, then we have been delivering very fast, and this is guided by the willingness to keep industry here in Europe.
And then Giles, I want to bring you in here. I mean, analysts now predict that the EU is likely to miss its offshore wind target of 60 gigawatts by 2030. How bad are the problems facing the wind sector today, and what should the EU do to help?
Thank you. The European wind energy supply chain is traditionally strong. We've managed to preserve it, but it's not big enough. You want it to be 36 gigawatts a year manufacturing capacity. We produce significantly fewer turbines than that every year today. The companies in the supply chain want to build more factories, they want to grow, but they're not making enough money today to invest in new factories. Many of them are operating at a loss because the costs have gone up in the last 2 years. The costs of doing onshore wind have gone up by up to 30%, the cost of offshore wind by up to 40%. So the supply chain is struggling to get those new factory investments over the line. The wind power package that you'll be tabling in 2 weeks' time, Commissioner, is absolutely key to providing the public financial support through the EU, the European Investment Bank, and through national governments that's needed to unlock those investments.
And I want to bring you in here and let you respond to that. I mean, as you mentioned, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has announced this European wind power package out in a couple of weeks' time. I mean, can you give us a concrete sense of how it will deal with some of these issues and what it might contain?
Indeed, we have already finalized several legislative proposals that will help our wind industry here in Europe. But on top of that, we do have at our disposal useful tools like giving guidance to member states, and everybody understands that now time is the essence. So I was national minister in 2018 when we last time found agreement on Renewables Directive 5 years ago, and still from the very first day in my office I started to reach out to the governments so that they have not transposed these good pieces of legislation in the national legislation. This is still ongoing. So now when we have this new RED III in place, of course implementation is the key, but we can fast track that. So guidance, how to organize auctions, how to shorten the permitting, how to take care of supply chain, all of these aspects, unless we will address them in a very fast manner, will withhold us from these volumes that Charles was just mentioning, that we do expect to achieve our 2030 targets.
But it won't be a full legal proposal, but it will take what sort of shape?
No, there is no need for legal proposal. There is really the key is now for implementation.
There is no need for a legal proposal. There is no desire for a legal proposal because legislation takes too long.
There we go.
Europe's wind energy industry doesn't have time to wait.
There we go. There you have it. I think that we can segue sort of smoothly along to sort of the fact that the wind and solar industry are both facing fierce competition with China. Obviously, this is no secret. Chinese solar production is now half the price of panels produced in Europe. Wind turbine manufacturers in China benefit from subsidies and also cheaper and deferred long-term loans. Nicholas, I want to bring you in here, obviously, because you have an interesting national and EU-wide perspective. Your energy minister, Teresa Ribera, last week indicated that she could be open to putting up solar tariffs to protect European solar companies from China. Is that a good idea in your view?
Please let me say for one thing. We have RED 3, RED 4, RED 5. We don't need more legislation, but not because we are slow. No, we are, from the parliament, we are very fast. The problem now is the council, for example, when it comes to the electricity market design. So don't blame the commission, don't blame the parliament. But I think that we have enough legislation by now. We have to implement and to go for transposition in member states. That is really the needs that we have. Regarding the things that you mentioned about how to, I don't want to say the word protection, because we need competition. Unfair competition. And now we need solar panels from China. It's true, this is completely true. But we have to move forward to increase our production also in the European Union. I mean, We had to give tools to the industry, give support to the industry, and also take into account that sometimes the competition from China is not really fair. We have now some legal instruments. We are working in the CBAM regarding steel and also other materials that we have to take in mind that we need to produce solar panels in Europe massively, but taking into account that China is going to be our main supplier during more than a decade. If we speed up our production, our industrial production of solar panels, it's completely impossible that 100% European. It's impossible right now. So we have to strengthen our dialogue with countries as China. I think the Commission is having a good proposal regarding this, and when it comes to cars, to check if the competition from China is really fair. And I think this is a first step and a good signal for other components of the green transition. I think this is, I agree with my minister, but taking into account that we need a lot of solar panels.
Absolutely. And Walburga, I want to bring you in here. I mean, Solar Power Europe have been pretty skeptical on this idea of solar tariffs as a solution to some of the current issues plaguing the industry. Why is that?
For one good reason, because we had tariffs on solar products in the past, and what it did at the time was completely ruining the market. So from a very high deployment of solar that we already had some 10 years back, we went back to almost zero. And we don't want to see that replicated again. We want to be smarter this time round. And I think the Commission is taking a very good way with the proposal of the NCA, which we need to speed up in order to have those industries scaling up very quickly, because that's what we need. We need scale. We need huge factories also in Europe in order to be competitive, and we need to do that very quickly. So I think it's the right step to take, but what we should avoid in the meantime is putting the energy transition to a halt.
Absolutely. I mean, still, we had Acting Competition Commissioner Didier Reynders last week suggesting the Commission could open an anti-subsidy probe into Chinese state aid on its wind sector after doing the same with electric vehicles last week. Now, obviously, journalism is all about concision. So I'm now going to ask all of our panelists one by one a question, and I'm afraid I'm only going to accept a yes or a no answer, and then I will let them elaborate afterwards. So the question is, would you support an EU investigation into China's use of subsidies for its wind turbine manufacturers? Commissioner, I'm going to start with you.
I will have a EU-China energy dialogue this week in Beijing on Thursday. Well, I will first have a discussion with my counterpart, and then we will see how to follow up this dialogue.
But as things stand now, yes or no?
As things stand now, I am preparing a good discussion with Chinese, and it is exactly this moment of the week where you will not receive yes or no answer.
Okay, but open to exploring, if we rephrase that? Would that be fair?
Well, I think that we have to avoid any kind of trade war because, well, we, as a single market, we actually do benefit from open market and fair competition. If there is a proof that we are facing dumping measures, then of course we have to address that if this is unfair. But fair competition is also important for our industry because there is expectation that in several sectors our companies can be the exporters. Just to mention a few, well, wind technology, we still have a global leadership in offshore. Well, 3 biggest grid component producers are European companies. So I think that we have to strengthen our industry. This is what we plan to do with Net Zero Industry Act. But to achieve our even 2030 targets, we need so much more than we will be able to scale up here in Europe only within 5 years. Saying so, I also do believe that we should not end up in the situation where we will replace our very dangerous dependence on imported fossil fuels with another dependency. So not decoupling, but de-risking, if I quote our President von der Leyen.
So to be clear, you'll wait and see, but you're not ruling it out.
Never say never.
Okay. Giles, yes or no?
Commissioner, Europe has outstanding technology for offshore wind and onshore wind.
Yes or no first, and then elaboration.
China now has more offshore wind than Europe. They've overtaken us in numbers. Look, Nicolas has kind of answered the question already. You said, Nicolas, the Chinese competition is unfair. Before giving you a one-word answer, it's worth just giving the audience the benefit of some facts and figures here. Chinese wind turbine manufacturers are offering their turbines at prices that are up to 50% lower than the prices European manufacturers are able to offer them at. There are 5 manufacturers in Europe, by the way. They are also offering to deliver the turbines and saying to their customers, pay us in 3 years' time when you've built the turbines. Deferred payment for 3 years. European manufacturers are not able financially to match that, nor are they able legally to match that, because OECD rules say 1 year max deferred payment and only in exceptional circumstances. So we are not competing on a level playing field. The competition is unfair. And we have brought this to the attention of the Commission, and the Commission, quite rightly, is doing its homework and looking at the different options. There are various instruments, including new instruments, at your disposal, and it's absolutely right that full examination should be given to how those options could conceivably be used.
So is that yes or no?
I was trying to give the audience the benefit of a slightly more learned answer.
Nicolas?
For me, it's very clear, yes, because we are in a competition and we need transparency. I mean, there are suspicions. Look for transparency. I mean, the numbers are very clear, but why this is happening? Why? And it's very clear because Chinese are putting a lot of subsidies, and also we are paying our green tools with dirty energy, because it's mainly made by coal. By the moment, China is making a greater force in developing renewables. By the moment, we have steel in the wind turbines made with electricity produced with coal, and also the supply chains mainly with coal. So we have 2 unfair competition. The first one is a lot of subsidies from the Chinese government, and the second one is produced with no green technologies. Some technologies that you are saying, it's like a greenwashing. We say greenwashing the libro in Spanish, by the book, by the real rules of greenwashing, we are buying these wind turbines. So I think it's the moment to be more transparent and to have a very structured dialogue. Commission cannot say no, yes, because it's very difficult for her, and I understand. But from the Parliament, we have to be stronger than we are being in the past in this competition with China.
Perfect. Walburga, yes or no?
Obviously, for me, it's difficult to say something on the wind sector.
Absolutely.
But maybe I would...
What about solar?
But what about solar, indeed? And that's what I wanted to do, because I think it's also worthwhile highlighting, why we have these very, very low prices at the moment in the solar sector. Giles was talking about low prices. We also see low prices at the moment. We have been looking into it, and what we see is really a perfect storm of market forces. So we see prices that are basically the level of the prices that we've seen before the pandemic, and a little lower today. During the pandemic, prices have gone up because of supply chain constraints, and now they are getting back to the lower level and to even below. The reason being is that a lot of capacities have been built up in China. So what we see is that we have production capacities already today of around about 500 gigawatt. And by the end of this year, it might even be 900 gigawatt. just to put that in perspective, we expect the global market this year to be around about 450 gigawatt. So you see there's a huge overcapacity that has been built up, and it has been built up because the demand predictions that we see, the demand forecasts are just huge for solar. So this is why, and a couple of other things, we see projects not being built that quickly in Europe, so we see also a little bit of a stallment when it comes to the Q3 demand. We have thought it would be a little bit more upbeat, and all of that together makes that prices are just very low at the moment.
Perfect. So we talked about some of the urgent challenges facing the industry today, but I'd like to talk about a little bit more about the wider political and logistical obstacles that we face. Nicolas, on top of the immediate issues facing the industry, one of the core problems holding back a fast rollout of renewables is how projects are funded. This forms a core part, of course, of the EU's electricity market reform proposal, for which you're chief negotiator. One of the options being considered at the moment is actually getting rid of the most controversial part of the reform, investment schemes called contracts for difference. Could you very briefly explain what these are to our audience, and also tell us what would be the implications for you of scrapping them from the proposal?
First, let me say one thing. We want to maintain CSD as it is in the final outcome of the Parliament. That for us is the more beneficial way to give predictability and stability to the market when we use CFDs. I mean, one of the proposals or the main actions from some actors in the Council is to give retroactivity to some investments. I don't want to say the technology, it's not the moment. But in any case, I think this is not a good idea, because we need more electricity, more clean electricity. And we have to invest in new power, not in old power. So giving money to an existing power plant is not a good idea. We want to speed up the transition. I want to comply with our renewable targets. So for me, it would be a mess to remove CSD, and secondly, to give this possibility to the retroactivity. I think there are other things on the table, but let me be clear. I have a great majority from the Parliament, so I have to defend the position of the Parliament and not to offer loopholes in the negotiation by the moment.
Absolutely. And Commissioner, I want to bring you in here on this same topic. I mean, in recent days, we've heard French President Emmanuel Macron saying that he would take back control of electricity prices, which government officials then confirmed meant France is ready to act unilaterally if necessary. Do you agree with this go-it-alone kind of approach? And what effect would it have on the rollout of renewables more broadly?
Well, our electricity markets are interconnected. So whatever happens in one market, which is as big as France, will also impact our neighbors. And over the last year, when several member states introduced emergency measures, we also saw that, for example, Spain was not able to introduce measures that only benefited their own market. We also secured that there was still cross-border trade taking place after these measures were introduced. Now, this electricity market design that we, as the European Commission, presented and that member states hopefully will discuss next Tuesday, and I truly hope that there is a willingness to reach on a general approach so that dialogues can start and we can conclude this file still under this European Parliament's mandate, was aiming two main deliverables. First, to protect our consumers from the impact of short-term markets and to bring them the benefits of more and more renewables in our grid. And CFDs is one of the instruments that could provide affordable prices to the final consumers. They are also the tools that will allow us to support new projects. If this is something where member states will not find agreement, then the current situation remains, that if you are willing to provide state aid to the subsidies to the new installations, you have to negotiate this state aid under the competition rules with the European Commission. But I do believe that that member states and especially energy ministers, I don't know how is mood among presidents, but at least among energy ministers, there is a great willingness to find a broad compromise. Last year we achieved these kind of agreements one after another. And as I end, we came through this last very difficult winter relatively smoothly. So ministers still remember that agreement will deliver benefits to all the member states, and CFDs will deliver benefits for project promoters, but also for the consumers.
So in summary, you disagree with a more go-it-alone approach when it comes to...
Well, just deleting this paragraph will bring us to the situation where we are right now. So this was novelty in this proposal. Of course, there are many other very useful things, how to empower consumers and to give, also renewables the better backup by incentivizing, for example, demand response or storage. So we still very much need this new agreement. But I think that with the help of European Parliament, we also managed to save the principle of contracts for difference.
So you're confident about a deal next week?
Well, I'm confident that I will have there many ministers in person. They will not delegate that to ambassadors to negotiate, because they do understand that only if ministers are there in person, we will come out from this room with agreement.
And Valburga, I want to bring you in here as well. I mean, obviously we're talking about electricity. Another key bottleneck is, of course, grids. Why is upgrading Europe's grids so important to ensure a smooth rollout of renewables? And what kind of effects on the industry is a lack of action having right now?
So there will be no green transition without upgrading the grids. That is clear. And what we need really is a revolution when it comes to grids. 70% of renewables will be connected to the decentralized grid, to DSO level. And I'm very happy, Commissioner, that you kick-started more intense work with the forum beginning of September, looking into the main bottlenecks when it comes to further grid development. Because to give you a figure, and that's a figure we've taken from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, there's 1,000 gigawatt of solar projects in the US and the EU altogether, which are waiting for grid connection. So that's huge. And out of the 26 gigawatt markets that we are reporting in our global market outlook, 20 are reporting that they have issues with grid connection and with insufficient grid capacity. So it's really extremely urgent to act and especially put a lot of focus on the distribution grid. So what we need, for example, is more rules about grid connection procedures, digitalized grid connection procedures. We will be coming up with our recommendations on Wednesday, where in the last couple of months we've been sitting together with DSOs to together look at what is needed. We call it solar connection. Together with Eurelectric, we're launching it. And what we're saying is really what it needs is unified rules for grid connection, digitalize grid connections, and squeeze out of the grids that we have today as much as possible. I compare it with a toothpaste. We need to squeeze out as much as possible, put a lot of flexibility into the grids with hybrid projects, what you mentioned, and EDP is doing a great job on that, putting solar, wind together, putting solar, wind and storage together in order to make renewables 24/7, basically. So there's a lot of things that we need to tackle, and still before the next commission is coming in, and I'm very grateful that you're tackling it now, because we need to talk about it now.
And then, Commissioner, you've spoken passionately about upgrading grids. You've helped sort of organised, set up this conference and this summit as well. I mean, last week we heard that there would be a grid action plan finally in November. Can you give us an idea of what the Commission is considering including in there?
Indeed, now we are eager to address some of the bottlenecks with action plans, and we plan to present it at the margins of our PCI days. So we do know that actually our direct responsibility is cross-border infrastructure and transmission. And another deliverable of this week will also be the first projects of common interest list under the newly revised 10E proposal. On grids, we will address several aspects like permitting again. As you remember last year when we had emergency measures agreed very rapidly with member states, we addressed permitting already, but now when emergency measures will expire, we have to address it once again. Then supply chain issues, especially for subsea cables. And then the skills aspect, because if we really have to upgrade and strengthen our grids, especially at transmission distribution level, then it demands a lot of workforce.
That's really interesting. And I'm glad you brought up permitting, because I just wanted to ask briefly about that before we move on to our last topic. Nicholas, I want to come to you. The EU brought in obviously a selection of emergency measures, as the Commissioner said, on reducing permitting times for renewables last year as a sort of stopgap before the Renewable Energy Directive was passed. But a recent industry report found that the vast majority of member states haven't actually implemented that emergency regulation and haven't slashed permitting times to a maximum of 2 years, I think it was. How do we ensure that member states follow through on permitting and on their promises?
First, let me be clear, it's a problem for member states because they will pay more for electricity and they don't decarbonize the electricity system. And they will be more dependent on fossil fuels from enemies like Russia. For us, it's a problem. But behind this no transposition of these emergency measures that some member states are making big efforts to do that with some opposition, behind this is this public acceptance. Believe me, if you go to a territory where you have a massive deployment of renewables, we are having some problems, the same as grids. We need a lot of grids. We want a renewable-based system. Yeah, but renewable is centralized. Need more grids, more interconnectors. We are lagging behind in interconnectors regarding the European objectives, but we are also observing in the territories that we need a trade between permitting, public acceptation, nature protection, and also jobs. Because with more jobs, with a better trade, better exchange into the investment in renewables and territory, we will find less problems regarding conflicts, for example, in the courts, in the legal courts. So these projects, if you have an industrial trade with the territory, maybe industrial or other kind, it will be easier. And it could be an example also for the whole member state in order to go faster and implement these measures. Before I was discussing with Miguel de Andrade a project from EDP with solar and wind and integration to produce green hydro, and it's a project in a just transition area. We need also these projects because if you install renewables, you install a wind farm, you have a lot of jobs during the installation, but no longer beyond this installation. So we need this trade. We need this affordable electricity also giving opportunities to this territory. And I think behind all this is public acceptance. And the needs for transposition is also sometimes public acceptance.
Great, and I'm glad you mentioned public acceptance because I was going to move on to that in a second. I mean, I want to touch a little bit on the challenges to come and where do we go from here, the more sort of long-term challenges as well. And obviously public acceptance is a key part of that. Giles, I want to come to you and ask you this. I mean, in Europe, there appears to be rising political resistance now to green energy and climate policies, and we just have to look at the regional election in Hesse over the weekend to see how the far right instrumentalized heat pumps for electoral gain. What should be done, in your view, to keep energy transition issues out of culture wars?
If you engage communities very early in the process when you want to start building energy infrastructure, and you explain to them why this infrastructure is necessary, and you explain to them how and why they're going to benefit from this, they generally get it. Mm-hmm. If you look at the opinion poll evidence, consistently 75% of people in Europe want more onshore wind. Mm-hmm. Numbers even higher for offshore wind. And if you ask the people already living next to onshore wind farms, do they want more? Yeah, they're fine with it because they can see that they're benefiting. Mm-hmm. So wind farms are paying taxes to local municipalities wherever they are located. In some countries, the wind farms are paying additional benefits directly to the communities as well as a percentage of the output that they are generating. So there are ways of doing this. It's crucial to ensure the jobs are there. And we've talked about the fair trade aspect of Chinese equipment being sold in Europe. But there's another argument as well, or another way of looking at it, which is it's not in Europe's interests to be buying wind turbines that are not made in Europe, because then the economic benefits go to countries on the other side of the world. Mm-hmm. And we've got to think about our political license to operate here. We're going to be taking up 2% of Europe's land space with wind farms and 3% of Europe's sea space by 2050. That's a lot of infrastructure in everybody's backyard. People want to be reassured that the economic benefits are going to accrue to them, not to people outside of Europe. I mean, there are two more reasons why it's not in Europe's interest to be buying non-European wind turbines. One is energy security. We've just come out of one unhelpful dependency. Let's not increase our dependency on another country for their renewable equipment. And then there's the wider national security angle. Look at all the electronic data on the sensors on this renewable energy equipment. That data should be stored and analyzed exclusively in Europe. And we should have strict criteria for all wind farms that are built. And you can do this in the wind power package, Commissioner. The data must reside in Europe, and there should be criteria on cybersecurity as well.
And Commissioner, I want to let you respond to that, but also I'm interested more broadly in your take. Obviously, many Europeans are now facing, a cost of living crisis that's not been seen in years, if not decades. How do you sort of avoid these green transition issues from being negatively politicized within this climate?
It happened already 2 years ago when the Commission presented our toolbox for member states. What are the tools they can use to support households and small and medium businesses? And there was a long list of measures. I can say that during the energy crisis, each and every government used at least a couple of these tools. As a end result, this was also a year when our fossil fuel subsidies skyrocketed. So now we have to find a way where these investments or this public expenditure will be directed into renewables, because these are something that provide us energy security, sovereignty, but also bring more affordable prices. And for that purpose, all our Fit for 55 files were created. So one after another will bring more affordable prices, being it lower heating bills after you renovate your houses, or more affordable electricity prices if we will achieve our national targets for renewables. And indeed, we will also promote the best practices. There are some member states where permitting takes significantly less time than in others, and there are also some project promoters who have wonderfully involved local communities. So usually I get invitation for the inauguration ceremonies where European Commission has provided grants worth of tens or hundreds of millions. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a wonderful opportunity to participate in the inauguration of the first French agro PV solar field. So solar panels that are significantly higher than average, they are offering shield for crops, but at the same time produce electricity, and 40% of the revenues is distributed to all the farmers in this region. This was a big local festivity. Everybody was well excited. So these new innovative solutions will actually help us to raise awareness that these three concerns of ours: energy independence, affordability, and security, affordability, and decarbonization can come together.
Perfect, perfect. And just the last topic I want to touch on before I take a couple of audience questions is flexibility and storage. Nicolas, I want to come to you, as obviously, as Miguel also touched on, as the EU's energy system becomes increasingly powered by renewables, which are intermittent, having a flexible system that can adapt to ensure that supply and demand match constantly will be increasingly important. How do your amendments within the power market reform proposal help overcome this issue? And should, in your view, the Commission look to propose a fuller sort of proposal within these elements in its next mandate?
First, let me say that in the electricity market design, we are working very intensive in these possibilities of flexibility, and also how to match the demand in these flexibility opportunities. I mean, we have a problem of demand now in Europe. The demand is decreasing, and we are installing a lot of solar panels, windmills, but we need more demand, and the demand will come from the side of the transport. So if we want to bet in renewables, we have to increase demand, and also the transfer will help us to match this demand with the offer. But meanwhile, we don't have enough decarbonizated transport. We need to invest first in grids, second in storage, and third, of course, in new projects that can take advantage of this surplus of energy, of electricity, that is hydrogen. So in the energy market design, we are working on this position, how to boost flexibility, but how to boost the management of the demand, and how to implement new measures that increase the power of citizens taking decisions. That sometimes is not the power of a singular person, that are machines, and digitalization is also key to do that. But don't forget, please don't forget the demand in electricity. We are having a problem in Europe with that. And it's true that we managed to decrease the demand because we need in the past not to burn fossil fuels to produce electricity. But now we are having this problem in some countries in Europe. And if you don't have enough demand, you won't have people that want to invest in renewables, because this electricity will be zero or sometimes below to zero in the electricity market. So don't forget that. Boost flexibility, but boost flexibility according to the demand.
Okay, fair enough. And Commissioner, maybe I'll just finish with you. I mean, do you think that there's an opening there for the Commission in its next mandate to propose something specifically on storage and flexibility? Obviously, we didn't have necessarily the same time that we would have normally had with a proposal but this is what happened. So would you be open to that?
I think that flexibility and demand side flexibility as such will help us to address the peak hours, and will help us to avoid immense investments into the capacity mechanisms. So if we will empower our consumers, not only industry but also retail consumers, that brings benefits, and it is worth that if Commission can bring all the member states on board on these actions that we still need to uptake, they will do so under the next mandate.
Perfect. I just want to take at least one question before we finish off. So we had an interesting question here about. Yes, maybe let's go to Nicolas for this one. We've seen, this is Lucas Klamsper, who asks, we have seen some oil and gas companies pulling back from their renewable energy plans recently. Can there be a true energy transition without them?
We want to do that without them, but we need, by the time, we need fossil fuels in some member states. But of course, all these energy companies, oil and gas companies, are having also trajectories to increase the necessity and the use of renewables. We have very good examples in Europe. But let me be clear, we don't need more fossil fuels. We don't need more new extraction of fossil fuels. And we want to buy less fossil fuels as soon as possible. We are having more than 30 degrees now in Spain and Portugal. This is the real problem. This is the real problem, and we have to face it as soon as possible.
Perfect.
And let me say one thing. My apologies, because I have to go running to vote in the ITER committee right now. So I apologize because, sorry for leaving, but we have only 5 minutes to reach the parliament.
Please go ahead.
So sorry, because we were with some delay.
Yes, lawmaking awaits, so please. Thank you very much. And just last question then before we wrap up. So we have Maurizio Geri who asks, de-risking is not enough to repeat a mistake with Russia. How can we stop dependency on China before it's too late? Commissioner, perhaps this one for you.
We have to address the supply chain in the global scale. So this is a main pillar of our international dialogues with several partners. How to diversify our supply chain, how to secure that some of the critical raw materials that we do need and will need them significantly more than now will be available for us. Of course, it also means that we have to prioritize new technological solutions, prioritizing recyclability. We do have already lots of materials here in Europe which are just too expensive right now to recycle. And we do have also some of the brightest minds who are still working on new solutions. Miguel was mentioning IEA report that half of the technologies that will deliver us climate neutrality by 2050 are still in experimental phase. This is now better. 2 weeks ago, Vattenfall told that this is only 35% that will help us in next decades, and some of them are already mature enough. We have to help our companies who have invested lots of finances to research and innovation to come through the valley of death and mature and scale up their production here. So this is what we plan to do. But saying that, we will need international partners. We just need several of them, not dependency on only one single source of supply.
Perfect. And with that, I'd like to say thank you to all of our panelists for this great discussion. I think it's given us some food for thought. Now we'll just take a very, very quick look at the results of the poll that were presented by EDP. As you'll remember, the question was, which are the main challenges for an accelerated deployment of renewables in Europe? Some of the results are as follows. So it looks like permitting comes out ahead, then grids, then market design, and then flexibility, all topics we touched on, so that's good. Perfect. Also, thank you so much to our audience in person and online, and to our speakers for joining us on stage, and finally to our partner EDP for making this event possible. We'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to email us about the event at live@politico.eu. Finally, you can check our Politico events website for the latest lineup on all of our events happening this year. Thank you very much.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.